Alright guys, this is going to be a quick video covering the upper respiratory system. So the first term is the external nares, which are essentially your holes into your nose right here. So you can see it right there coming up. That's your external nares, which you can also see right here coming out. Like if you're picking your nose, you're picking your external nares. The nasal vestibule is right when you enter. It's like this lobby. So directly when you enter into the nasal through the external nares, you enter into the nasal vestibule. The nasal septum is actually, it's made up of hyaline cartilage, and it's the separation between the two external nares, left from right. The nasal cavity is going to be this entire space right here where these three specific bumps lie. So this is the nasal cavity. And those three bumps are going to be your turbinates or conchae. So you have this tiny, tiny one on the top. That's the superior nasal conchae, or superior nasal turbinate, middle nasal conchae, or middle nasal turbinate, inferior nasal conchae, or inferior nasal turbinate, and then they have grooves underneath each of them, and the grooves are associated with their names. So, superior nasal meatus, below the superior nasal turbinate, middle nasal meatus, below the middle nasal turbinate, and inferior nasal meatus, below the inferior nasal turbinate. Next we have the internal nares. So the internal nares is directly behind those three bumps. So you came in through the external nares, you sat in the nasal vestibule, the nasal cavity, and then behind it is the internal nares. Then you have this little divot. That's the entrance to the auditory tubes. Okay. Next we have our pharynx, which is a tube shared by the respiratory and digestive system. So the pharynx is going to start way up here, and it's going to go all the way down here. Okay, so it has three specific regions that you need to know. So you need to know that you have the nasopharynx, which is way up here, behind the nasal cavity. The oropharynx, which is right here behind the mouth. And then down low, you have the laryngopharynx, which is behind the larynx, which we'll talk about on the next video. So nasopharynx behind the nasal cavity, oropharynx behind the mouth, and the laryngopharynx behind the larynx. And that's it. Alright, in this video we're going to cover the larynx and sound production and all of its structures. So we have the larynx, which is right here. Okay, so the larynx is kind of the connection between the pharynx and the trachea for the respiratory system. And so the epiglottis is going to be this awesome, so this is this awesome model. It's kind of like a sound shaker. The epiglottis snaps shut over the trachea to prevent food from going down the wrong tube. Okay, so the epiglottis on this model would look like this. So food's going down, and you have the epiglottis coming out right here, which would snap shut over the top of this trachea right here. So here's the larynx, and then here is the trachea below it. So larynx, trachea, and then there's the pharynx right there. Then we have the hyoid bone. So the hyoid bone kind of sits on top. Right there is the hyoid bone. So in this, you can see the hyoid bone sits right there, right on top of the larynx. Okay. So then we have the thyroid cartilage. So the thyroid cartilage is this really large cartilage right here on the front of the larynx, and that is what gives you your Adam's apple. Below that you have the cricoid cartilage. Cricoid cartilage, it's still large, it's not as big, but cricoid cartilage, thyroid cartilage above it. And then you have a couple ligaments that connect them. So you have the median thyrohyoid ligament. So I think of it as bottoms up, like Trey Songz. So median thyrohyoid ligament goes from thyroid to the hyoid, median thyrohyoid ligament. Median cricothyroid ligament is right here, connecting the cricoid cartilage to the thyroid cartilage. Median cricothyroid ligament. Then we have some cartilages that you need to know on the backside that help with sound production. So you have the corniculate cartilage, which is just this itty bitty little piece right here, corniculate cartilage. And then you see this piece right here that's mainly covered in muscle. All this muscle's covered. This is the arytenoid cartilage or arytenoid cartilage. Okay, so then if we open up that model, we can see some of the folds on the inside that help with sound production. So we take this model and we open it up. Okay, so we have this. This is the inside. And now you can see that extension of the epiglottis up here. This entire piece right here above this little divot, this is the vestibular folds, vestibular fold. There you have that divot, and then the bottom side of the divot, including that white coated piece, this is the vocal folds or the vocal cords. There you go. And then our last term for this video is the glottis, and the glottis is the actual opening. Let me show you right here. You see that? Oh my gosh. It's the actual opening from the larynx to the trachea, and that is the glottis. So you have this model, and you see this part of the trachea right here. The actual opening from the trachea into the larynx is the glottis. Alright guys, in this video we're going to go over the lower respiratory system. So last time we talked about the larynx. This time we're going to talk about the trachea right here, and then once it branches into all this fun stuff. So we have the trachea right here. Most people refer to it as their windpipe. And the trachea is covered in all these rings known as the tracheal cartilage. And if you flip to the back side, you'll notice they don't cover the entire back side. They just ring to a certain point. Tracheal cartilage. So once the trachea branches, okay, there's an internal ridge right as they branch known as the carina. Carina. C-A-R-I-N-A. So once it actually branches, the first branch is the primary bronchi, one for each lung. Then it branches into secondary bronchi. So there's 3 secondary bronchi on the right side and only 2 secondary bronchi on the left side, because there are 2 lobes on the left side, but 1, 2, 3 lobes of the lungs on the right side. Then once the secondary bronchi branch even further into these colored tips, they're known as tertiary bronchi. And that's it for what you can see on the models. Ask your TAs for when it gets smaller and more microscopic. Okay? Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to cover the lungs and its associated structures. I'm just going to cover the structures you can see on the actual models. For all other types of stuff, please ask your TAs or whoever is instructing your lab course. Okay? So for the general lung anatomy, if we look at it here, okay, it has 2 major regions. So the flat bottom of the lungs is the base, and these top pointed regions, see how it comes to a point at the top? Those are the apex of the lungs. Okay? The hyla, or the hilum of the lungs, is the region where, if you open it up here, okay, and you have the heart attached still. Okay, the hilum of the lung is this region right here where all the blood vessels and the bronchi are traveling in and out of the lungs. Okay, so the bronchi and all the blood vessels, pulmonary arteries, and veins are traveling in and out of the lungs through a region called the hilum of the lungs. Okay, so next we have the actual lungs. So we have a right lung and a left lung, and they have different lobes. So the right lung is going to have more lobes than the left lung. Can you think of why? That's right. The left side of the lungs has to support the heart is slightly slanted to the left. So the right side is going to have this superior lobe up here, this middle lobe right here, and then this inferior lobe right here. So you'd say superior lobe of right lung, middle lobe of right lung, inferior lobe of right lung. Okay, so I'm going to cover the fissures of the right lung real quick. So I have the horizontal fissure going across right here, separating out the middle lobe from this top lobe here. And then you see this oblique fissure coming down the sides. This is separating out the inferior lobe from these other two top lungs. Oblique fissure of the right lung. Next we move to the left lung. So we just have the superior lobe right here, and we have the inferior lobe right here. So you can see this fissure right here, and that is going to be the oblique fissure of the left lung, and there's only one fissure on the left side. But then you have a couple weird terms. You have the lingula. So the lingula is this little structure that sticks out from the superior lobe right there. That's the lingula. And then you see this little notch right here to make space for the heart. That is the cardiac notch. And that's it for this video.